February 20th, 1945. 18:30 hours. Apartment cellar, Dresden, Germany. Anna Bauer crouched in the cellar ruins with her two children, Greta, age 8, and Klaus, age 5, listening to Soviet voices in the street above. 5 days had passed since the firebombing, 5 days since Dresden burned, 5 days without food beyond a handful of charred potatoes scavenged from destroyed buildings. The children were silent now. They'd cried the first 2 days, hunger, fear, cold, until exhaustion and weakness made crying impossible. Klaus had stopped asking for food yesterday. That frightened Anna more than his earlier begging. When children stopped asking for food, it meant they were giving up. The apartment building had partially collapsed during the firestorm. Most residents died, incinerated, suffocated, or crushed. Anna and the children survived by sheltering in the cellar's deepest section, protected by luck and thick masonry walls. But survival meant nothing if they starved in ruins while Soviet occupation forces controlled what remained of the city. The Soviet voices grew closer. Boots on rubble. Russian words Anna didn't understand, but recognized as military communication. Soldiers on patrol, checking ruins for survivors, establishing occupation control over conquered city. Anna pulled the children deeper into shadows, pressing them against the cellar wall. German civilians had heard stories about Red Army behavior in occupied territory. Stories of revenge for German atrocities in Soviet Union. Stories that made death by starvation seem preferable to discovery by Soviet soldiers. The footsteps stopped directly above their hiding spot. Silence. Then movement. Someone climbing down into the cellar. Boots scraping on broken masonry, heavy breathing from physical exertion. A figure appeared in the cellar entrance, silhouetted against gray twilight. Soviet soldier. Young, perhaps 25, uniform worn and dirty, rifle slung across back. He stood motionless, letting his eyes adjust to darkness, scanning the space. Klaus whimpered. The small sound in the silence was devastating. The betrayal after days of enforced quiet. The Soviet soldier's head snapped toward the sound. He moved forward, rifle unslung now, held ready. He saw them, woman, and 2 children pressed against wall, filthy and skeletal, staring at him, with expressions mixing terror and resignation. Anna waited for the rifle to rise, for the shout bringing other soldiers, for whatever Soviet revenge looked like when applied to German civilians who'd supported regime that killed 27 million Soviet citizens. Instead, the soldier lowered his rifle. He stared at them, especially at the children, for what felt like minutes. His expression showed no hatred, no triumph, just recognition of suffering so profound it transcended nationality. He spoke in Russian. Anna understood nothing except the tone, which wasn't aggressive. Then he did something incomprehensible. He reached into his pack, pulled out something wrapped in cloth, and extended it toward Anna. Bread. A full loaf. Military ration bread. Dark and dense. The kind Soviet soldiers received as daily allotment. Anna stared at it, unable to process what was happening. Enemy soldier. Occupied city. Starving children. And he was offering food. The soldier shook the bread slightly. Universal gesture meaning, take it. When Anna still hesitated, paralyzed by confusion and fear this was cruel trick, he set the bread on ground between them and stepped back, hands raised showing they were empty, non-threatening. Then he spoke again. One word Anna somehow understood, despite language barrier. Daddy. Children. He pointed at Klaus and Greta, then at the bread, making his meaning clear. This is for the children. Feed them. He turned and climbed back up to street level. Anna heard his boots retreating. She waited, expecting him to return with other soldiers. Expected this to be an elaborate trap. But he didn't return. The bread remained on the cellar floor, real, substantial, salvation measured in dark rye and military rations. Anna crawled forward, grabbed the bread, and tore off pieces for the children. Greta and Klaus ate slowly. Their stomachs too empty to handle more than small bites, but each bite was life returning to dying bodies. That evening, the Soviet soldier who'd brought bread saved 3 German lives, and for reasons Anna wouldn't understand for weeks, He would return again and again, bringing food to the family he was ordered to hate. Dresden. The context of ashes. Dresden's destruction. February 13th, 1945. Remains one of WWE's most controversial bombing campaigns. British and American air forces attacked the city with incendiary bombs, creating firestorm that killed approximately 25,000 civilians and destroyed 90% of city center. The bombing's military necessity remains debated. Dresden wasn't major military target, but it was transportation hub and contained some war production. The firestorm was hell made real. Incendiary bombs created temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius. The heat generated winds of 100+ mph, sucking oxygen from air and people from buildings. Glass melted, stone cracked, metal warped. People caught in open were incinerated instantly. Those in shelters suffocated as fire consumed available oxygen. Bodies in street were cremated where they fell. Anna Bauer's husband Helmut had died in 1943 on Eastern Front, killed fighting the same Red Army that now occupied Dresden. Her apartment building had housed 12 families before the bombing. 3 families survived. 9 families, approximately 35 people, died in the firestorm. She'd watched neighbors burn, heard screams that still echoed in nightmares, lost everything except her children and will to keep them alive. When Soviet forces entered Dresden February 15th, they found destroyed city populated by traumatized survivors. The Red Army's reputation preceded them, stories of revenge killings, mass rapes, systematic destruction in occupied German territory. Soviet soldiers had witnessed Wehrmacht atrocities in Soviet Union, 27 million Soviet citizens dead, entire villages destroyed, civilians murdered systematically. Many Soviet soldiers believed German civilians deserved harsh treatment as collective punishment for supporting Nazi regime. But not all Soviet soldiers embraced revenge. Some, like the young soldier who found Anna and her children, saw suffering transcending political categories, recognized that children were victims regardless of nationality, maintained humanity despite experiencing war's worst brutality. Private Mikhail Volkov. The Soviet soldier who brought bread was Private Mikhail Volkov, age 24, from Ukraine. His story explained why he helped enemy civilians when revenge would have been understandable. Mikhail's village, Krasny Luch, in Donbass region, had been occupied by Wehrmacht in 1941. German troops executed male villagers suspected of partisan activity. They took food, livestock, and supplies, leaving village to starve. Mikhail's father was shot as suspected partisan. His mother died from starvation during winter 1941-42. His younger sister died from typhus, caused by unsanitary conditions under occupation. Mikhail joined Red Army in 1942, age 21, motivated by revenge and determination to drive invaders from Soviet soil. He fought at Stalingrad, Kursk, and through Ukraine's liberation. He saw combat's worst horrors: comrades dying in agony, civilians caught in crossfire, cities reduced to rubble. By 1945, he was veteran of 3 years constant combat, survivor of campaigns that killed most of his original unit. He had every reason to hate Germans. His family was dead because of Wehrmacht occupation. His homeland was devastated. 27 million Soviet citizens were dead. German atrocities justified harsh treatment of German civilians as collective punishment for supporting Nazi regime. But Mikhail had also seen what hatred produced. He'd witnessed Red Army soldiers committing atrocities against German civilians, rapes, murders, unnecessary destruction. He'd seen hatred creating more hatred, violence begetting violence, revenge spiral destroying everyone it touched. And he'd seen children, German children, who looked like his dead sister. Children who hadn't chosen this war, hadn't supported Nazis, were simply born in wrong country at wrong time. Children starving in ruins of cities Soviet forces conquered. When Mikhail found Anna and her children in Dresden cellar, he saw his sister's face in Greta's. He saw the starvation he'd witnessed in his own village. He recognized suffering he couldn't prevent in his homeland, but could prevent here, in enemy city, by choosing mercy over revenge. The bread he gave Anna was his own ration. Giving it away meant he'd go hungry that evening, but he had army to feed him eventually. Anna and the children had nothing. The choice seemed obvious. Despite decades of propaganda teaching him, Germans were subhuman enemies, deserving extermination. The return. Mikhail returned the next evening. Same cautious approach, checking that no other soldiers observed, climbing down into cellar, bringing food wrapped in cloth. This time, it was kaza, buckwheat porridge left from mess hall, and a small piece of sausage. Anna was less terrified this time, though still confused. She tried to communicate, "Warum?" Why? Mikhail didn't speak German beyond basic words, but he pulled from his pocket a photograph, worn and creased, showing young girl, age perhaps 7. He pointed at the photo, then at Greta. "Moja sestra," my sister. Anna understood. This Soviet soldier who fed her children did so because he saw his own lost family in them. His mercy wasn't abstract political statement. It was profoundly personal, driven by grief and recognition that all children deserve protection regardless of what nations they belong to. Over following weeks, Mikhail returned regularly. Every 2 or 3 days, whenever his military duties allowed, he brought what he could: bread from his rations, food scavenged from abandoned stores, occasionally potatoes or turnips acquired through mysterious means. The quantities were small. Soviet army itself operated on minimal rations, and extra food was non-existent. But each delivery meant Anna and children ate that day. He also brought practical help. He showed Anna which ruins might contain salvageable items. He warned her about areas where other Soviet soldiers might be dangerous, certain units, certain commanders who encouraged harsh treatment of Germans. He told her, through gestures and minimal shared vocabulary, that she should stay hidden, avoid Soviet patrols, emerge only when necessary. Why did he take these risks? Helping enemy civilians violated military discipline. If discovered, he could face severe punishment, reduced rations, imprisonment, possibly execution. Soviet political officers watched for bourgeois sentimentality and insufficient hatred of class enemy. Mikhail was risking himself to help people he was supposed to hate. His motivation remained profoundly personal. Each time he helped Anna's children, he performed act of mercy his mother and sister never received. He couldn't save his family, but he could save this family. He couldn't prevent German occupation's cruelty, but he could prevent Soviet occupation's cruelty through small acts of defiance disguised as individual kindness. The other soldiers. Not all Soviet soldiers showed Mikhail's restraint. Red Army occupation of Eastern Germany was marked by systematic violence against German civilians, mass rapes, murders, looting, destruction. The motivations were complex: revenge for German atrocities in Soviet Union, official encouragement of harsh treatment as punishment for Nazi crimes, breakdown of military discipline after years of brutal combat, alcohol making soldiers more violent, propaganda dehumanizing Germans as collective enemy. Anna witnessed this violence. She heard screams from neighboring ruins, women being assaulted, men beaten or shot, property destroyed. She saw German civilians executed for minor infractions or no reason at all. Soviet occupation was brutal reality that made Mikhail's mercy more extraordinary. By contrast, why did some Soviet soldiers show mercy while others committed atrocities? The difference wasn't ideology or orders. All received same propaganda about German crimes. The difference was individual moral choice. Soldiers like Mikhail saw suffering and responded with compassion. Others saw suffering and responded with revenge or indifference. Military structures enabled both behaviors. Officers who discouraged atrocities could limit violence in their units. Officers who encouraged revenge created environments where atrocities flourished. Individual soldiers made choices within these contexts. Some choosing humanity despite encouragement toward brutality, others choosing brutality despite opportunities for mercy. Mikhail belonged to unit under relatively disciplined officer who discouraged unnecessary violence. But even within that context, Mikhail's repeated assistance to enemy family was exceptional, risking punishment to maintain personal moral code. The children's recovery. With Mikhail's help, Anna and children survived. Greta and Klaus slowly regained strength. The regular food deliveries preventing starvation, their bodies recovering from weeks of extreme deprivation. They remained dangerously thin, but they were alive and improving. The children's psychological recovery was more complex. They'd experienced Dresden firebombing's trauma. The heat, the screams, the bodies. They'd endured days without food, believing they'd starve in ruins. They'd learned to fear Soviet soldiers as existential threats. But Mikhail was Soviet soldier, who brought food instead of violence. His presence created cognitive dissonance. Enemy who acted like protector. Soldier who showed mercy instead of hatred. Russian who cared whether German children lived or died. Klaus, age 5, understood this most simply. He called Mikhail der gute Soldat, the good soldier, distinguishing him from other Soviet soldiers who represented danger. When Mikhail visited, Klaus would run to him with childish trust that transcended national enmity. Mikhail would ruffle Klaus's hair, give him extra piece of bread, speak Russian words Klaus didn't understand but recognized as friendly. Greta, age 8, was more complicated. She understood that Mikhail's people had killed her father, that Soviet invasion meant Germany lost the war, that her family's survival depended on enemy's mercy. She was grateful but resentful, relieved but angry, dependent on and suspicious of the soldier who fed them. Anna explained as best she could. Mikhail is good person in bad situation. Like us, war makes people enemies who should be friends. He chooses to be kind when he could be cruel. That makes him special. The explanation was imperfect but honest. War created artificial enmities between people who shared more similarities than differences. Mikhail's choice to see those similarities rather than emphasize differences was moral courage. Anna tried to teach children to recognize and honor the discovery. In late March 1945, Soviet political officer noticed Mikhail's reduced rations. Soldiers were required to maintain adequate nutrition for combat effectiveness. Mikhail, eating less than required, raised questions. The political officer, Lieutenant Petrov, true believer in Soviet ideology and harsh treatment of Germans, investigated. He followed Mikhail on evening patrol, watched him enter ruined building, observed through gaps in rubble as Mikhail delivered food to German family. Petrov confronted Mikhail publicly in front of the unit. You give our rations to fascist civilians. You betray Soviet Union to help enemy. You will be court-martialed for treason. Mikhail didn't deny the charges. They are children. They were starving. I have food. They don't. Helping hungry children isn't treason. It's humanity. They are German children, Petrov shouted. Children of fascists who killed millions of Soviet citizens. They deserve to starve. They are children, Mikhail repeated. They didn't invade Soviet Union. They didn't kill anyone. Punishing children for adults' crimes is what fascists do. Are we fascists? The confrontation created division within unit. Some soldiers agreed with Petrov. Germans deserved harsh treatment collectively. Others sympathized with Mikhail. Children were innocent regardless of nationality. The unit's commander, Captain Sokolov, found himself mediating impossible situation. Sokolov was pragmatist, not ideologue. He understood revenge's appeal but also recognized excessive brutality undermined military discipline. He didn't want his unit remembered for atrocities, but he also couldn't allow open defiance of orders against helping enemy civilians. His compromise: Mikhail would receive formal reprimand but no court-martial. He would be prohibited from further contact with German family, but he wouldn't be imprisoned or executed. The punishment satisfied neither Petrov, too lenient, nor Mikhail, prohibited from continuing mercy. But it ended immediate crisis, while leaving unresolved moral questions about revenge versus humanity, collective punishment versus individual innocence. The final delivery. Before being forbidden to help Anna's family, Mikhail made one final delivery. He brought as much food as he could carry: bread, kassa, potatoes, even small tin of meat, acquired through mysterious means. He also brought something more valuable: information. I cannot come again, he told Anna, through limited German vocabulary and gestures. Prohibited. But you survive now. Spring comes. Garden possible. Soviet administration organizes civilian food distribution. You register. Get rations. Be safe. Anna tried to thank him adequately, but words seemed insufficient. You saved us. We would have died. Why? Why help your enemies? Mikhail showed her the photograph again. His sister who died during German occupation. War makes enemies. But children are children. Soviet children. German children. Same. Need food. Need safety. Need adults who protect, not harm. I could not save my sister. I save your children. Maybe somewhere. German soldier helps Soviet child. Maybe mercy goes around world. Helps everyone eventually. The philosophy was simple but profound. Mercy wasn't transactional. I help you expecting return. It was circular. I help you hoping mercy becomes general practice helping everyone. Mikhail helped German children not expecting gratitude or reward, but hoping mercy rippled outward, creating culture where all children received protection regardless of nationality. He gave Klaus final ruffle of hair, touched Greta's cheek gently, nodded to Anna, and left the cellar for last time. Anna never saw him again. Survival and recovery. With Mikhail's final delivery, Anna had enough food to survive until Soviet administration established civilian rationing system. Spring 1945 brought improved weather, allowing Anna to plant small garden in ruins, potatoes, turnips, whatever seeds she could scavenge. Dresden slowly organized civil administration under Soviet occupation, providing minimal order and food distribution. The children survived. They grew up in Soviet-occupied East Germany, later the German Democratic Republic. They carried memories of Dresden firebombing, of starvation in ruins, of the Soviet soldier who brought bread when death seemed certain. Greta Bauer, in 1989 interview before German reunification, recalled Mikhail saved our lives. Simple fact. Without his help, we would have starved in that cellar. Soviet soldier, who should have been our enemy, chose to be our protector. That taught me war's moral complexity. Not all enemies are evil. Not all allies are good. Individuals choose to be kind or cruel regardless of what uniforms they wear. Klaus Bauer, in same interview. I was too young to understand politics. I just knew the Russian soldier brought food and was nice to me. He didn't speak German, but he was friendly. Years later, I understood what that meant. Enemy showing mercy when revenge would have been understandable. That's heroism more powerful than battlefield courage. Anna Bauer lived until 1992, dying at age 82 in reunified Germany. She never forgot Mikhail. She tried unsuccessfully to find him after the war. Soviet military records were sealed. Ukrainian soldiers returning home didn't leave forwarding addresses. The chaos of post-war Europe made tracking individuals nearly impossible. But she told her children and grandchildren about the Soviet soldier who brought bread. The story became family history. Moral lesson about mercy, transcending hatred, testimony to human goodness, persisting in war's worst circumstances. Mikhail's fate. Mikhail Volkov survived the war. He returned to Ukraine in 1946, to a village that barely existed, most buildings destroyed, population decimated. He worked reconstruction, rebuilt his family's home, married a local woman who'd also lost family to war, raised 3 children. He rarely spoke about the war. Soviet veterans' experiences often went undiscussed. Official narratives about Great Patriotic War emphasized heroism and victory, not moral complexity or individual mercy. Mikhail's decision to help German civilians might be viewed as ideological weakness, so he kept it private. But he told his wife, Katerina, about the German family he'd helped in Dresden. She understood immediately. You did right thing. Children need protecting always, regardless of politics. You honored your sister's memory by saving those children. Mikhail died in 1983, age 62, from cancer possibly related to war exposure. At his funeral, Katerina mentioned to their children that their father had helped German civilians during war, showing mercy when revenge was easier. Mikhail's son Dmitry, researching family history in the 1990s after Soviet Union's collapse, tried to find the German family his father helped. Post-reunification, some records became accessible. Through persistent research and amazing luck, Dmitry found Anna Bauer's surviving children in 1994. The meeting was emotional. Dmitry representing his father Greta and Klaus able to thank their rescuer's family 50 years later. They shared memories, Dmitri's stories about his father's character, quiet, compassionate, traumatized by war but refusing to hate. The Bauer's memories of the Soviet soldier who saved them. Your father was hero, Greta told Dmitri. Not because he fought bravely, because he showed mercy when military culture encouraged revenge. That's harder courage. Dmitri brought photo of Mikhail in Soviet uniform, the same soldier who'd appeared in the Bauer's cellar 50 years earlier, young and alive, before cancer and age. The Bauers wept, seeing face they'd never forgotten, finally putting name to memory that had defined their understanding of humanity in war. The pattern. Mikhail wasn't unique. Throughout WW's Eastern Front, individual soldiers, on both sides, occasionally showed mercy despite systemic brutality. Soviet soldiers helped German civilians despite orders treating all Germans as enemies. German soldiers helped Soviet civilians despite Nazi ideology teaching they were subhuman. These acts were rare, exceptions proving rule of warfare's cruelty, but they existed. Why did some soldiers choose mercy? Research suggests several factors. Personal experience of suffering. Soldiers who'd experienced starvation, loss, or brutality were sometimes more empathetic toward enemy civilians suffering similarly. Strong pre-war moral formation, religious faith, family values, or ethical education provided frameworks resisting military dehumanization of enemies. Recognition of shared humanity, seeing individual humans rather than abstract enemies, particularly when victims were children or elderly. Rejection of collective punishment, belief that civilians shouldn't be punished for government's crimes, that individual innocence mattered more than national guilt. Desire to maintain self-respect, refusing to become monsters war encouraged them to be, preserving human dignity through merciful acts. Mikhail embodied all these factors. He'd suffered family killed by occupation, maintained values, protected children as general principle, saw humans. Greta reminded him of dead sister, rejected collective punishment, children innocent of Nazi crimes, and preserved self-respect, choosing type of soldier he wanted to be despite military culture. The moral question. Dresden's bombing and subsequent Soviet occupation raise uncomfortable moral questions about collective punishment, civilian suffering in war, and revenge's justification. Was Dresden's firebombing justified? Military arguments cite transportation hub and war production. Moral arguments note mostly civilian deaths and questionable military value. The debate continues. Was harsh Soviet treatment of German civilians justified? Soviet argument. Germans inflicted enormous suffering on Soviet Union, 27 million dead, cities destroyed, systematic atrocities. German civilians supported Nazi regime, benefited from conquered territories, enabled crimes through complicity or indifference. Collective punishment is justice. Counter-argument. Civilians didn't choose war, couldn't stop Nazi policies, suffered under dictatorship themselves. Children particularly were entirely innocent. Revenge against civilians was vengeance, not justice, reduced Soviets to Nazi moral level, created suffering without military value. Mikhail chose second position. Collective punishment was wrong regardless of German crimes. Children deserved protection regardless of nationality. Mercy was morally superior to revenge, regardless of justification offered. His choice didn't erase German atrocities or minimize Soviet suffering. It simply refused to add more suffering to a world already drowning in it. The legacy. The story of Soviet soldier who brought bread to starving German family matters because it demonstrates mercy's possibility even in war's worst circumstances. Dresden 1945 represented everything justifying revenge, destroyed city, starving civilians, occupation by army, whose homeland had been devastated by these same civilians' nation. Yet Mikhail chose compassion. He fed children of people who'd supported regime that killed his family. He risked punishment to help enemies who'd never helped him. He maintained humanity in circumstances designed to destroy it. That choice didn't change war's outcome. Dresden remained destroyed. Soviet occupation remained brutal. Millions remained dead. But it changed 3 lives immediately. Anna and children survived, and hundreds more indirectly their descendants. people who heard the story, others inspired by mercy example. 70 years later, the lesson remains, even in wars fought without quarter, even when revenge seems justified, even when enemies have committed atrocities, individual soldiers retain moral agency. They can choose mercy over hatred, compassion over revenge, humanity over ideology. These choices don't stop wars, but they prove wars don't eliminate human goodness, that mercy persists in violence's midst, that individuals can be better than systems they serve. Mikhail brought bread to people he was ordered to hate because he saw hungry children and had food. That simple equation, suffering witnessed, capacity to help, choice to act, created mercy moment that echoed through 7 decades. The Soviet soldier and German family never met again after March 1945. But the bread he brought, the life he saved, the mercy he showed, these created bonds transcending enmity, proving that even enemies can recognize each other's humanity. Even war can contain moments of grace. Even hatred's worst expression can be challenged by compassion's quiet persistence.